So is it possible to hire a private investigator to search for assets on contingency, meaning that you don't have to pay money to the investigator to search for assets, only if they find assets and you later recover them? That would be ideal, right? So that as a debtor or a victim of a fraud, you don't have to pay any more money out of pocket to search for assets to recover your judgment or to recover your fraud case, but you give the money only after you recover. So you have really nothing to lose, right? You have no downside. Is that possible? Well, there's a couple reasons why not only is it not possible, but you might not want to do it even if it was possible. The first reason is if you have an investigator who is attempting to locate assets for you, and they're only going to get paid if they find the assets, that means they're not getting anything paid to them up front. So what's going to happen is they're not going to probably spend a lot of time or effort looking for assets. They're going to look at the easy stuff. If there's easy assets to find that are very relevant or obvious, they'll find them and make an easy buck. If it's going to take them a lot of time and money to find these assets, they don't want to go any negative any more than you do. Look, if you're the one that's owed the money in a judgment, and you're the one who actually has money coming to them, and you're the one who maybe was a victim of fraud, if you're not willing to come out of pocket your money, the investigator's probably going to be less likely to, because they don't have any real stake in this game, right? You're the one who's owed the money. They're not. So if you're hesitant to pay money to find the assets, why would an investigator be inclined to do that? You might think, well, it's a big upside for nothing. Well, it's not for nothing, because whatever you were going to spend on that case, instead of you spending it, now the investigator's spending it. So you may find an investigator who says they're going to do it on contingency, but all they're going to do is look for easy stuff. If there's nothing there, they're just going to drop it and work on cases where people actually are willing to pay them money, right? Because that's how investigators make their money. Number two is there are factors outside of the control of the investigator about receiving that money. Let's say a private investigator finds $1 million in an account that could satisfy your judgment, or they find hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of hidden assets that will pay back your fraud. Well, they're not allowed to actually seize the assets. That can only be done by what's called a writ of garnishment. It has to be signed by the court, and by law, those funds or those assets have to go directly to the creditor. It has to go directly to you. It can't go through the investigator. It can't go to a third party. The assets have to go directly to you, the person who's owed the money, by law. Which means now the investigator has to be trusting you that you're going to give them the money. They can't just take it in advance. They have to give it to you, then wait, and hopefully you give it to them. Well, that's a factor outside their control. What if 2 or 3 years later, the client gets this money and decides, well, this is not fair. This is my money. I don't want to lose any more giving it to the investigator. Or maybe you think it took too long, or maybe you think that they didn't do a good enough job, and now you owe them the money, and they're in the same position you were, right? Somebody owes them money, and they have to go after you, right? So there's factors outside your control. Plus, the investigator doesn't even know if your case is good. You know your case is good. You know that you have a valid judgment or you have a valid claim, but the investigator doesn't know your whole backstory. In order for them to find that out, they would have to do a full investigation on you and your case to make sure it's a valid judgment, a valid legal case, and it's still in effect. There's no prohibiting factors like a default judgment that would keep the funds from being transferred. Look, they might find $1 million, but then when you go to get your writ of garnishment from the court could say, no, this judgment isn't valid, or has to be reactivated, or it's been too long, or it was a default judgment, so you can't just take the money until this person appears in court. There may be some legal factors that keep you from immediately taking that money. The investigator doesn't know that. If for them to find it out, now they would have to spend time and money and probably get some attorney to review the case to make sure that there's a legal judgment that's still valid. That's number two. The other thing that investigators will look at is, look, if you're not willing to put your money at risk, that's a red flag, right? Because if you're not sure enough about your judgment, where you're not going to be willing to at least come out of pocket something to pay a professional person to find the judgment, then why should the investigator? That should tell the investigator something. You know better than us as a client if your case is any good. If you don't think your case is good enough to come out of pocket money, then the investigator is going to think, well, if you don't think it's that good and it's your case, then why should we now become a victim of this debtor and now put our money at risk too, right? Like I said, there may be some investigators that will take the case, maybe try to find some easy money. If it's not there, just forget about it. Maybe keep sending you emails or voicemails. Yeah, I'm finding it, I'm looking, and putting you off. But they're not going to spend a whole bunch of time and money trying to find assets when they don't have any money coming in, right? Here's the fourth reason. It's illegal. In most states, it's illegal for an investigator to work a case on contingency. Licensed private investigators are given a very valuable license by the state in most cases. Sometimes it's federal government, sometimes it's state, to be able to perform investigations. The terms and conditions of that license in most states are that you cannot work on a contingency basis. The reason why is they want investigators to take a phrase from an old TV show, just the facts. They don't want investigators to make things up or to do things illegally or to do things kind of sketchy or using hacking or any kind of improper means to find assets. If that investigator is incentivized for a certain result, they might fudge the numbers, or they might forge documents, or they might make something up that's not true. If they're getting paid no matter what the answer is, they don't have any incentive to lie, right? Attorneys in some narrow cases can work on contingency because attorneys now actually have to be an officer of the court and they have to abide by certain criteria. Investigators are not allowed to work on contingency in most cases. So there's 5 or 6 good reasons why investigators can't do it. And in most cases, even if they could, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go with the cheapest option. It's kind of like hiring a brain surgeon that has the lowest price. You don't want somebody working on a case where your money's at stake, that they're working for free. They're working for nothing. And you might say, well, it's not really for free. If they find money, they get to keep it. Well, even if they do find money, there's no guarantee they get to keep it. If you as a client decide, well, I'm just not going to pay them, they're out of luck. And you might say, I would never do that. Well, see what happens when you actually get that money and you need all of it to pay for kids' college education, medical bills, pay your back taxes, pay for your rent or your mortgage. You might say, well, the investigator's just going to have to pound sand. Even if only 1 out of 10 clients do that, that might eat up all the effort that is spent on the other 9, right? Investigators don't have a lot of profit built into their fees. So if 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 clients decide to tell the investigator to go pound sand, now all the money you made on those other cases is down the drain, all the net profit. In addition, there's no guarantee that the debtor even has money, right? When you do an asset search for somebody who has money and somebody who doesn't have money, meaning the debtor, the person who owes the money, it costs the same amount to search if you find something or if you don't find anything. So if 20 or 30% of the time the person you're trying to get money from has no money, the investigator is going to spend the same amount of time, effort, and fees to find these records as if they did find something. In fact, it probably costs more money to search for somebody who's broke because you have to search farther to find out they're broke. If somebody has money, you'll find that pretty quickly. If somebody's broke, you have to find out, oh, bank accounts, nothing. Hidden accounts, nothing. Real estate, nothing. You have to keep going deeper. So you're not going to find that out until you're far into the case. Make a long story short, asset searches on contingencies are a bad idea. If it's not worth spending money to actually hire somebody who knows what they're doing to find assets, don't bother. Just chalk up your losses and don't go any further. You can find investigators that will work with you on price and give you a good deal, but you don't want to hire the cheapest brain surgeon to try to get your money back. Because if it's important to get your money back, it's important to do it right and not do something that's fly by night or illegal.